I even was convicted, for a crime that I didn't commit, and I took a plea. And there's reasons why, it's a lot of innocent people who've been coerced into taking a plea for, a mitigated sentence that's probably, you might have been threatened with doing life in prison for something you didn't do, but if you take a plea, you might get 5 years. So,
Right.
this system is wicked and very corrupt. I was placed in shackles and cuffs. They cut off my clothes, stripped me naked, and threw me inside of a cold prison cell with shackles and cuffs on, and left me in there just like that with shackles and cuffs on, no clothes, for over 24 hours. They wanted me to die. They probably thought that I was going to die because of that.
They will use you up, chew you up, and spit you out. You know that. They don't give a fuck. And this is the thing about the BOP, just about government in general. Like, if people think, oh, well, no, I want a big government. No, the government cares about you. Let me tell you something. When you give the government absolute power, they will treat you just like they treat those inmates, because they have absolute power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and there's no repercussions to how they can treat you. Hey, this is Matt Cox. I'm going to be interviewing Ronnie Bo. He is a former drug dealer, wrongfully incarcerated, sued the police, I think 2 or 3 different times. And he is currently a book author and rapper. Should be a super interesting interview, so check it out. Let's go back and start from the beginning. You were born where, in Milwaukee?
Yeah, north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the 53206 area to be exact. And I mentioned the zip code because there was a movie that was released about 3 or 4 years ago about the 53206 area, because according to the researchers in that movie, that was listed as the highest crime rate area in America at the time.
Okay. So you were born there, raised there?
Yeah, born there, raised there. Outside of traveling and being in prison a bunch of times, that's been my environment most of my life.
So, did your parents have several kids? I mean, were they your brothers, sisters?
Well, unfortunately, my mother only had 2 boys, which my older brother and I, and he got killed in 2016 from a fatal gunshot wound. So I'm the only child now, but yeah, it was just me and him growing up, and up until the day that he was killed.
All right. What did your mom do for a living?
I'm like typical Black mom in poverty, 9 to 5. She was actually working at Walgreens when I was young, and all of her jobs having been much greater than Walgreens. I mean, recently she worked for Amazon. Yeah, just that's about it. That's all I could say as far as her employment.
Okay. Your dad, was he in your life, or?
Barely. I mean, my mom and my dad stayed together until I was probably about 8 years old, and though they broke up, he left, and he wasn't a part of my life since that point. So I guess it's safe to say that I grew up without a father figure.
And you went to school, in the area? Like, how did that go? Were you a good student? Did you?
Yeah, well, actually, the elementary school that I went to, called the Folly, it was actually directly right across the street from the house that I grew up in. And I did pretty well at school. outside of having, behavior issues. And I mean, I guess there's many reasons why I was acting up. But as far as, grades, when I wanted to comply and pay attention and be a good student, I was able, to get good grades. But I kind of dropped out early high school, and then I went to juvenile prison my freshman year, and I ended up finishing school with it's called a HSED. It's worth more than GED, which is more common. And I finished that within months. So I actually finished school in juvenile prison.
How'd you end up in juvie?
Well, caught a drug case. That wasn't even my first case. I was pretty bad as a juvenile delinquent. So I actually had more felonies as a juvenile than I do as an adult. I was just, most of the cases were either gun related or drug related, but more so drug related.
Well, how did that get started? Like, how'd you start selling drugs?
Well, unfortunately, just being raised in poverty, my mom wasn't able to provide for me and my brother sufficiently, I would say. And, there were kids at the school that I would go to, that I was going to, who would, kind of like ridicule me because I wasn't fresh enough. I didn't have the brands of clothing that they wore. And, that started to bother me. I didn't have the video games I wanted. So at an early age, I actually started selling drugs when I was 11 years old, really just for school clothes and video games, things of that nature.
Okay. So how long, and then you said you ended up catching a case?
Yes. My first case was actually a reckless endangerment. I shot up a resident's home. A guy had sold me a cell phone back then when cell phones were just becoming popular. He told me that there were like 120 minutes on the phone, and I had made like one too many phone call, and it was done. And he didn't want to give me my money back, and he was running and hiding from me. So just being a young wild child, I took that approach and got that infuriated over the incident to where I wanted to cause him some very serious harm. He wouldn't come outside, so I just shot up the home.
Okay. What'd you shoot up with? Is it like a 22? Is it an AK-47? Like,
ironically, and this is documented, but ironically, it was a shotgun, and I was a small kid, so I'm still small now. So, and that kind of helped me because, while fighting the case, my attorney was basically saying he too big to carry a shotgun and shoot one. And so I actually beat the reckless endangerment and was only charged with possession of a dangerous weapon by a child, because the only real proof and evidence they had is that my fingerprints was on the gun.
Okay. Where'd you get the gun?
Even though the statute of limitations is up, okay. I don't want to be telling nobody.
All right. So how did you end up in juvie though? That wasn't the case, you said, right? Or was it?
Well, I did go to juvie for that, but they released me on house arrest for that. I only sat about a week or two before I was released, and then I was only charged with possession of a dangerous weapon, which wasn't a serious crime, which it definitely wasn't as serious as reckless endangerment, the allegations of me actually shooting this gun into a resident's home. So the case was kind of petty. They gave me probation, and then while on probation, I caught a case for delivery of a controlled substance. I sold drugs to undercover cop, and I actually didn't sell the drugs to him directly. A friend of mine lied to me and told me if they knew this person, they was trying to make a couple dollars off of the transaction. So I gave the drugs to a friend, and he served the undercover cop and brought me the money back. And by the time he brought me the money back, the police just came from out of nowhere, caught me and arrested me. And that was around the time I went to jail during my freshman year, and I did a little bit of time for that.
And that's when you got your high school diploma?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you get out. When did you get out?
I got out to be exact, it was April of 2004.
Okay. And so you went and you got a job at the bank, and now that's, you're still working there and everything's fine, and you did the right thing, and now you're a mortgage broker, and no?
Yeah, I wish I definitely had plans of doing such things, but unfortunately, the day after I was released, I started back selling drugs. As a juvenile, it's like you don't have the same conscience as especially when you don't have kids. It's like, you were locked up around a bunch of other kids who talked about doing the same things when they got out. So it wasn't like I did time and thought, well, look, it's time to change my life. I need to do this and that. I was still in those young and dumb stages to where it's like, well, I got off on this. I'm out now. I need some money. This is the only way I know of making money, and I need some quick money. So this is what I'm gonna go back to doing. Basically, that was my state of mind at the time.
So, how long did that go on until you got busted again, or?
I actually got busted again a year after, in 2005, and I actually caught 3 cases that year. Well, 2 of them I was really friendly, and even back then, I was being harassed by the police. But one of them I was actually guilty. I bailed out on the first 2, and then the last time I was like, well, I knew I would have to sit eventually anyway. I knew that I would be convicted, so it was like, I might as well sit and get this time out the way the third time. And 2 of those cases were drug cases, and the third case was possession of a firearm. And the crazy thing about that is I was always told, like, as a juvenile, that the juvenile felons wouldn't affect me in my adult life, but I was charged as a felon with a firearm based upon my juvenile felon. So I started realizing the injustice of the system even back then, because that was unlawful.
Your lawyer didn't fight that? He just said, oh yeah, that's the way it is?
Yeah, he actually admitted that they wasn't supposed to be able to do it, but they don't really. That's another thing I realized. These lawyers, it's really about money, and I understand that it's not really about defending the civil rights and constitutional rights of your client. For them, it's all about just money. If they could make more money getting you off, they might try to get you off. But if they could make the same money or more by getting you a deal or whatever, then that's what they gonna do.
Right. So, I mean, what happened? So what happened after that? How long did you get on that one?
Well, a part of my plea deal was to drop 2 of the cases and to plead to 1. And I still, unfortunately, was sentenced to a total of 9 years. The way that the sentence was structured, though, was 3 in, 6 out. So I did 3 years straight and got out on paper. I managed to stay out on parole or whatever for about a good 2 years. And then I didn't even catch another case after that until my Fed case. But I went back for a parole violation. The stipulations of my parole was revoked because of a parole violation. My son's mother called my probation officer and said that I'm still selling drugs. She lied, said there was a bunch of drugs in the house. By the time they came, there was no drugs there. And then while I was locked up on hold for that, they have a phone call with basically me cussing her out after I found out that she was the one that called and said I had drugs. So they actually gave me intimidating witness for that. And, I was basically threatening her. I was upset, telling her I'm going to smack the nail out of her, when I get out. So the phone call made me seem like a real bad guy. Even though no drugs was found, they gave me a violation for intimidating witness. And the crazy thing about that is I did more time than I had ever done in my life for parole violation. They revoked my parole for 4 years. So I did 4 years straight after that, just off the allegation.
You did 3 and then another 4.
Yeah.
And this is all state.
Yeah.
What's going on, YouTube? RDAP Dan here, Federal Prison Time Consulting. Hope you guys are all having a great day. If you're seeing and hearing this right now, that means you're watching Matt Cox on Inside True Crime. At the end of Matt's video, there will be a link in the description where you can book a free consultation with yours truly, RDAP Dan, where we can discuss things that could potentially mitigate your circumstances to receive the best possible outcome at sentencing or even after you started your prison sentence. Prior to sentencing, we can focus on things like your personal narrative, your character reference letters, prepping you properly for the pre-sentence interview, which is going to determine a lot of what type of sentence you receive. If you've already been sentenced, we can also focus on the residential drug abuse program, how you can knock off 1 year off of your sentence. Also, we have the First Step Act where you can earn FSA credits while serving your sentence. For every 30 days that you program through the FSA, you can actually knock an additional 15 days off per month. These are huge benefits, and the only way you're going to find out more is by clicking on the link, booking your free consultation today. All right, guys, see you soon at the end of the video. Peace. I'm out of here. Back to you, Matt.
That's horrible, bro.
Yeah, that was horrible. And that was the worst time of my life because it's different when you catch a case and it's like you're guilty. It's like I deserve to sit, but when it's something petty like that, and it's like, wow, y'all got a call about drugs. No drugs was found. So technically, I felt like I should have been out. But y'all still giving me 4 years for parole violations based on a call. And I thought I had the right to be upset if somebody was to lie and make such allegations about me to jeopardize my freedom. But, the system works how it works. And, I think.
Why did she call? Why did she call? Like, why would...
We were having relationship problems, and in Milwaukee, it's just the culture here. Like a lot of black men are on probation. We cheat, we mess up. Some of us do go as far as putting our hands on females. That's not my thing. I'm totally against that, but it's like they use that as a way to blackmail you and say, well, I'll call you PO. You could get into an argument or you could be cheating or whatever. And it's like, I'm going to call you PO. That's how they blackmail us out here. And it's very typical out here. So, she used that against me, and she actually went and followed through with her thoughts of getting back at me through jeopardizing my freedom. So I mean, it's just a crazy story. Even the memories kind of upset me again just thinking about it.
So you did 4 more years, but this time you weren't in a juvenile facility. So when you got out this time, I mean, were you still thinking the same way?
No, not really, because see, a part of the reason why my son's mother did it that, like, she was insecure about who I was becoming. This is around the time of my life I was taking my career as a rap artist serious, and I was in the Source magazine, which was considered at the time as like the hip hop Bible. You know, a lot of people in the rock and country genre, they look up to the Rolling Stone magazine as a major accomplishment to be in, and that's what the Source magazine was to the hip hop culture at the time.
Right.
So I was there. I was reviewed on the top 40 charts at the time for Drake and Lil Wayne stealing one of my songs. So I was becoming big off all of that type of publicity, and she felt like, I had options, and that although my heart was with her, she just felt like she, being at my show, seeing the attention I get from other females, she didn't like how I interacted with other females because, yeah, I seen them as my fan. I gave them hugs. I could tell that some of them were like actually interested in me. And to be honest, sometimes I would be interested in them as well. And she could see that. So with me not being around, sometimes her mind is automatically, oh, he out doing this, he out doing that. I could be taking pictures with a fan, and she might see the picture and think, oh, that's his girlfriend. So we start having problems in our relationship because of just based on that. And that led to a lot of arguments. Sometimes things did get physical. I don't believe in beating a woman, so I never actually really like heard her put my hands on her, but sometimes, I will have to, grab her up and tell her calm down, chill out, stop swinging at me, stop throwing stuff, that type of stuff. But yeah, and then it led to that, to where it's like, well, I know if I get him locked up, then maybe I won't have to worry about him cheating, or maybe these girls won't like him so much if he was in jail. But yeah, that's that.
So when you did the 4 years, did she stick around?
Yeah, that's what's crazy because she was the one putting money on the phones and sending me books to read, and actually putting money on my books for me to order a commissary. So she was there, and that's another thing. Like while I was doing time, she sent me a lot of books about business, about not just the music business, but other businesses that I was interested in. And I had made up my mind during that time, during that 4 years, that this is how I'm gonna make money from now on. I've been selling drugs since I was a kid. That's too risky. I felt like it was a immature hustle for me, because I really grew up doing that, and I felt like it's for me, it's like for the young and dumb. But when you have sense and you know how to make money off books or music or real estate, it's like it's kind of childish to even want to take that risk, especially if you have kids that are dependent on you. Like I had a son by then, so I didn't want him to grow up and go through the things that I had to go through. So it's like I got to put I have to put this lifestyle to the side and start, developing into this area of it.
Right. Well, so then you basically get out after 4 years. You've got kind of a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your plan?
Well, while incarcerated, I was studying credit systems, and I was actually able to start building my credit there. You know, I would have my son's mother apply for certain things, go on annualcreditreport.com, send me a copy of my credit report, and, you know, order this book so I can know how to add this trade line, how to build credit. So that was a major part of my plans to, you know, establish credit. So when I get to the point I want to buy a home, whether it's to rent it out or flip it or live in, you know, credit comes in handy for things like that. Also, if I wanted to take out a loan to invest into my music career or my career as a book author, you know, so I could execute a marketing plan or whatever, it's like, okay, I won't have to raise money in the streets by selling drugs to do this. You know, now I build credit, so now I could take out a business loan or whatever and do everything the right way. So, you know, I was definitely progressing towards those plans.
All right. So what's the next thing that happened? What year is this, by the way?
Well, I was incarcerated from 2010 until 2014. And in between that time, I actually published my first book in 2012 from prison.
Okay.
That, like, for the first couple months, it seemed to be a success, but my main market was inmates. You know, I seen how much books sold in prison. Everybody, you know, read books being in the streets. I never seen nobody read a book on the street, you know what I mean? But locked up, everybody was reading books. So it was like, okay, there's a market for this. And I seen the type of books that they were reading. So I wrote a book on certain subjects, you know, that to appeal to the urban culture. And the book was actually banned while I was in prison. You know, the prison staff, the security director, they thought that I was like some type of gang leader. And they confiscated my book. They read it. They said that I was teaching gang literature. They said that I was recruiting gangster disciples for Larry Hoover, like something like totally outrageous. And I think that should be in one of the articles that I sent you. But you know, that kind of like held back the success of that book, because now it's like, wow, so my book is banned by my targeted market. So now who do I sell the book to now? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I published another book by the time I got out. It was a women's empowerment book titled Value of the Vagina. So I was working on my marketing plan for that. When I got out, I was building credit. I didn't like professionally start a credit business, but I was making income on the side by helping people with their credit, you know, doing simple things like disputes, adding trade lines, teaching them where to go to get along, what the creditors look for. So I was making money off the credit. I was making money off book sales. I was doing events, you know, as a rap artist, you know, just regular like shows, performances, concerts. So that was my source of income at the time, like after my release from prison in 2014.
So how long did this go on until either your next, till something changed or you got arrested, or go on, sure.
It's a crazy story. It's a hell of a story. Now, while I was incarcerated, this guy, I don't even know if I should say his name, because he he turned out to be the informant in my Fed case. And I put out a song like around the time that I was arrested and bailed out. I put out a song called Whack the Rats where I mentioned him by nickname. And 2 or 3 days later, I had a U.S. Marshal warrant out based on things I said in the song about him. So just to rewind us back to, you know, the root of the problem, basically, while I was doing time, you know, I had already met the guy. I know him. He had a local magazine out that was doing very well in the city. So by the time I got locked up, you know, I was emerging as a rap artist. So I was publishing articles and ads in his magazine. So we were doing business together even while I was incarcerated. By the time I got released from prison, you know, he was a club owner and the club wasn't doing so well. He knew that I was a promoter. He knew me from doing successful events. So we went into business. That was, like I said, one of my sources of income was doing events. So he hired me as a club promoter for his club. So we started doing business on that area. Now, behind the scenes, I guess he was involved in illegal drug activity, street activity, because the feds had arrested him. And this was during the time we were doing business together. They arrested him for a drug conspiracy. He and like 15 other people, and they had him as the leader. Now, it was a guy who he had introduced me to at one of my events, a guy that was based in Chicago who was listed in our indictment as his supplier. Now, he introduced me to this guy. You know, the guy wanted to meet me because I had an organization called Bo Girls, and they were my promoters. You know, basically, I would get a digital flyer made, takes it to them, they post it on their social media, and this is how all my events sold out. So I had 90 Bo Girls, and they assumed that I was a pimp because I had all these girls calling themselves Bo Girls, promoting my events and my books and things of that nature. So this guy that I was introduced to, just so I don't confuse the audience again, the magazine publisher introduced me to a friend of his who was based in Chicago, who was later listed in the indictment as the supplier of the guy who owned the magazine. So when the guy who owned the magazine got arrested, the feds wanted him to set some people up and work on some people. So the target was the guy that I was introduced to in Chicago. He was supposed to be the supplier. So I developed a relationship with this guy. We became cool. You know, he had other business endeavors. He wanted to get off into concert promotion. So he was basically saying, I will invest into you. I will pay to bring guys like Lil Durk to your events, and we can split the money like this. You just the promoter, I'm the investor. So, you know, we got cool. We started doing business like that. So I don't know if my so-called friend who introduced me to this guy was jealous of our business bond or whatever, but he later told the feds, you know, the feds asked him, do he know anybody else that this guy is supplying? And he told them that he supplies me. So this is how the feds got on me. They started watching me from there. They were harassing me. I've been stopped plenty times. They came to certain houses. No drugs were ever found. And I was being harassed for like a year from this. So
did you know why? Or did you have any inkling as to that this guy had put the feds onto you? Or were you just like, I have no idea what's going on? Like,
absolutely. At first, you know, I do have a bad criminal history. So at first, I just speculated that maybe they assumed by seeing me become successful in other areas, maybe they thought that my money was coming from the street still. So that's what I assumed. I didn't speculate that no particular person or anything had put them on me. I just thought, well, they probably see me growing and developing as something else. Like I got into political affairs. There was a local politician by the name of Mike McGee. Me and him had put out a documentary together. So it was just a lot going on, and I thought maybe they targeting harassing me because of this or that. I really didn't even assume that this guy had put the feds on me already, but it had got out of hand. Like they was asking me to actually be informant. They kept saying things like, "Well, we know that you are." You know certain drug dealers. Maybe you're not in the streets, but we know, you could help us out, and we want you to be an informant for us. And when I seen that they was trying to make me be an informant, I actually had sued them, And the crazy thing about this too is that it's like before I sued them myself, because I sued them without an attorney, it was pro se, but I was telling a lot of attorneys about what was going on, and they didn't want nothing to do with it,
Right.
So I actually had to sue myself, and 2 weeks after I sued, I was indicted as a member of a drug trafficking organization based in Chicago. And according to them, the guy that I was introduced to by the guy who owned this magazine was allegedly my supplier. So by the time the paperwork came out, I saw who the informant was, and I was shocked. Like, wow, dude, put the feds on me. I was aware of what everything that was alleged, and it's a very crazy case. If anybody is interested, the case number of the lawsuit is 17 CV 1192. That one is based in the Eastern District of Wisconsin. That's the lawsuit I filed against DEA agent Timothy P. Gray. I can't say that I won, because winning is going to trial and being rewarded a certain amount of money, but they did settle, which proves that there was merit in the case.
Right.
But I don't want to get too far off into the end results. I think that's where I'm going, but it was a lot of things that happened in between that before I actually settled the case. I even was convicted for a crime that I didn't commit, and I took a plea, and there's reasons why. It's a lot of innocent people who've been coerced into taking a plea for a mitigated sentence that's probably you might have been threatened with doing life in prison for something you didn't do, but if you take a plea, you might get 5 years. So,
right.
This system is wicked and very corrupt.
So you were indicted. Did they came and arrested you?
Yeah.
Did you bond out?
Huh?
Were you able to bond out?
Yeah, eventually. Like even prior to the arrest, like they wasn't just harassing me, but they was harassing this lady who was my ex-girlfriend at the time. And one time they arrested her, and they told her that they found 90 grams of heroin in her purse, and that they knew it was mine. I believe that they actually planted the drugs on her, but she actually she didn't even do any time for that. She later on in the indictment, they was threatening her with time, and then she later basically said that the drugs were mine and that I had been basically I basically been using her to sell my drugs for me, basically, just to sum it up. And a lot of her statements were obvious lies. She contradicted herself a bunch of times in her statements, just to try to get herself out of it. And, by the grace of God, my lawyer and I was able to point out all the contradictions in her statements, so they couldn't really use the things that she said against me. And when they indicted me, they actually separated the cases. I had a case based here in Wisconsin, and then the actual Fed case was based in Chicago, in the Northern District of Illinois. And the case that could have really put me away for a long time was based in Wisconsin. That's where they were saying I was a member of this drug trafficking organization. And that, the informant, the guy who owned this magazine, was saying that I had a worker that I used to use to, basically serve him drugs. So he was lying and saying that I was serving him drugs too. And there was one particular incident where he said that I served him 50 grams of heroin. And he named the guy as my worker. The guy that he named even admitted that he never met me, that he doesn't know me, and that he was never working for me. I even had my lawyer hire a voice analyst specialist because they said they had a phone call to prove that I was serving this guy drugs. And the voice analyst specialist results came back that the phone calls were definitely not me. So I beat that case. That case could have put me away for about 4 years. They tried to get me to take a plea for 10 years. I wouldn't take the plea. I definitely knew that I wasn't guilty. The day of trial, they actually dismissed the case after basically it was confirmed that the person on these calls wasn't me, and that the guy who they said was my worker admitted that he doesn't know me. They dismissed the case at trial. So then I had to deal with the case based in Chicago, where they said that this 90 grams of heroin was found in my girlfriend's purse, and then she later said it was mine. So my attorney was basically like, well, you got the big case out the way, and you already set a certain amount of time. And the guidelines, according to the guidelines, you're only facing about 41 months for this. So if you take a plea, you'll be out in another couple months. So even though I knew I wasn't guilty of the other case, he was right. I had already set time for a case I didn't do. The lady who was my ex-girlfriend was willing to testify and basically lied and say that I had her selling drugs and that the 90 grams of heroin was mine. And he just felt like it wasn't worth the risk of going to trial, because if I would have went to trial, I probably would have did about 20 years for that. But with the plea, basically just pleading to the guidelines, which was only about 41 months, it's like, okay, well, it's not worth rolling the dice. Basically, I could take this plea and be back home to my family in a couple months. So I took the plea.
Okay. So, and then you got out. Was the lawsuit still going, or had you already settled the lawsuit?
Yeah, the lawsuit was again filed before the whole indictment. So, I forgot what the attorney for the DEA who I was suing, they filed something. I forgot exactly what it was called, but it basically put my lawsuit on hold until my indictment was over with. So once I was convicted on the indictment and that was out, then I was able to get the lawsuit back going. And I mean, it's a very crazy story, bro. Like, before I took the plea, as I said, the lawsuit was already going, but before I took the plea, the evidence had not surfaced yet that the officer, the DEA officer Tim Gray, he was later arrested himself, for telling a fellow officer to frame someone else in a criminal case. So his fellow officer went back and told on him. And the crazy thing is, this all happened before I took the plea, but it didn't surface into my indictment until like a year later. My case was held back because of the coronavirus pandemic and all that. So by the time sentencing had approached, documentation had surfaced that this DEA officer, Tim Gray, had not only framed me and fabricated evidence against me to indict me, but he had done this on other occasions. And one of his own fellow officers had came forth and said, yeah, he asked me to frame someone in the case. So then it was more obvious that the claims that I had made in my lawsuit were likely to be true. So by the time I got out, I had the documents from the Department of Justice that showed that basically it was proven that he had fabricated evidence against other people and framed other innocent people in cases. So I used that, to basically solidify my lawsuit against him.
You would use that to help bolster your case. All the information that came out with the officer that he was obviously willing to set people up. So you use that to bolster your case, and then what? They settled?
Yeah, they start offering me deals once I filed the evidence into my lawsuit that basically proved that this guy was fabricating evidence against others. It strengthened my lawsuit. So once I started filing such evidence into my case, his attorney started reaching out to me for settlement conferences and things of that nature. I was sending certain documentation to certain politicians. I sent it to Congress. I sent it to the Senate, people who were supposedly overseeing cases of government injustice and corruption, police misconduct. And so once they basically saw the approach that I was taking in the direction I was going with the case, they didn't want that out to the public. And that's why it's an honor to be on your platform, because like I was reaching out to, mainstream news media, places like Time Magazine, Chicago Sun-Times, other mainstream news platforms, and no one would cover this. It's like the story would have never been told because they try to cover up similar instances of injustice, especially when it comes down to a federal agent. They'll be more likely to reveal what a local police officer is doing, but they won't be so quick to expose the actual federal agent, because that actually exposes the federal government. And another thing about the lawsuit is that even with the evidence, no attorney was willing to take my case, as if the case didn't have no merit. And some of them was even admitting that they were not willing to go up against the government, a government agent. According to them, it was bad for their career. So I was forced to study the law and learn the law, because no lawyer would have represented me. And some even made it seem like I didn't have no merit. But if I didn't have no merit, the case would have never even been settled, and it would have been dismissed years ahead of time. Like they were trying to dismiss the case for about 4 years. You know, the case against the DEA was filed in 2017, and it was settled in 2022 last year. So that case extended for 5 years, and if it didn't have no merit, or if they could have deemed it a frivolous case, it would have been dismissed a long time ago, probably immediately after I filed. But that just shows the type of, you know, people who work behind mainstream media, and it also shows the type of people who, you know, are supposed to defend the civil rights of the citizens here in America. You know, they not willing to really defend us against government corruption. So if we don't study this for ourselves, you know, they will be allowed to get away with almost anything. And then another thing, like, it's a blessing that platforms such as yours are started to emerge, because through platforms like yours, the truth could get out to the public about all the corruption that the government keeps in the dark. Otherwise, mainstream media would have never covered anything like this, where an actual federal agent is exposed and there's documentation to prove this. You know, you can't even say that my claims are allegations anymore, because it has all been proven. It's a fact that this DEA agent, Timothy P. Gray, to be exact, fabricated evidence against me and framed me as a member of a drug trafficking organization. And he did it with malicious intent. And the legal term for this is vindictive prosecution and malicious prosecution, because he framed me in a criminal case as a member of a drug trafficking organization after many attempts to coerce me to be an informant. And once I sued, because I felt like he was trying to put my life in danger by trying to force me to be an informant, you know, 2 weeks after I sued him for my allegations against him, then he brings forth all of these bogus allegations against me, you know, and frame me in a case. So, I mean, I'm grateful to be on this platform. It's an honor, and not just for me, but I think this will open the doors for many people like me, you know, all colors, all races, because this is not just happened to blacks in America, maybe more so blacks are targeted, but I was locked up with a guy named Alvin Wilkerson, a older white man, and he was one of the top fund managers in the world. You know, he was managing billions of dollars on the stock market, and he had some legal issues with Goldman Sachs, I believe they're called, and a few other major organizations. And as soon as he was attempting to file complaints about the things that he was going through, you know, they framed him in a case and said that he was basically stealing money from his investors and, you know, other powerful people in the stock market. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure this interview may even reach him, and he may want to tell his story next. So, I mean, I salute you, you know, for what you're doing.
I appreciate it. So what was the next? So what happened? So they settled the case with you. They came to you just before trial, right? Was this the one? And then they offered you something, and you were like, okay, I'll take it, because you know, like, something's better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, the first offer was 10,000, and you know, most people probably would even took that, you know, after fighting us for so long, and you know, everyone is basically in despair about it. Like my family, friends, even attorneys was basically saying that I'm wasting my time with going up against the government. They basically said you're not gonna win, you're wasting your time. You're not gonna get anywhere with this, you know. And so even though the $10,000 offer was a little or nothing, it indicated that, okay, I have a case. And by this offer, it's, it shows that, okay, I have a case. So I didn't jump on the offer. It actually made me go a little harder, because it's now it's like, when a shark smell blood, you go in for the kill, and it's like, okay, I smell blood. Now y'all offer me some money. So this is y'all way of saying we gotta try to, get him off the way before this goes to trial, because if this goes to trial, he may be awarded 10 million. You know what I mean?
Right.
And yeah, I actually had 2 lawsuits against the same agent, Tim Gray, because I sued him before he indicted me, and then after I beat the case where they were saying this guy was my worker, it showed false imprisonment, because I had already set about a year in prison on that case alone. So once that case was dismissed, then I sued him again for false imprisonment. So by the time they settled, they basically brought both lawsuits together and said, okay, we'll settle if you will agree to dismiss both these lawsuits against DEA agent Timothy P. Gray.
And at this point, he's also been implicated in corruption charges, where he's talking about, it's been proven that he's talking about framing people.
Yeah,
they don't want that coming up in court.
Yeah, one of his officers actually had him on body cam footage where he's asking the other officer, hey, plant this on this guy, or say you found something on him, or say he did this. I forgot exactly what he was trying to frame the civilian into, but he was asking this other officer to do it. And so the other officer was basically like, no, you crazy. I'm not doing that. And he reported him, and he gave up the body cam footage to prove that, Tim Gray had actually really solicited him to frame someone in a criminal case. So then other officers started coming forward and basically saying, yeah, this is him. This is what he known for doing, He framed this person, or he fabricated evidence against this person. So now it's like, wow, all of this came out in the midst of my lawsuit. I wish it would have came out in the midst of my criminal case before I took the plea, because I believe that they would have been forced to dismiss the criminal case if such evidence would have surfaced prior to me taking the plea.
Right. So after that lawsuit was settled, what happened then? Because you have another lawsuit. Like there were those 2 lawsuits, and there's a third lawsuit.
Absolutely. Now, the third lawsuit is the one that's still pending. And this lawsuit is against the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Now, while I was in custody in MCC Chicago, which is a federal holding facility, unfortunately, it was during the time of the coronavirus pandemic. So, I mean, I don't even have no experiences of what you guys were going through in the public, because I was incarcerated during that whole time. But I mean, I hear that it was bad out here for you all. So you could just imagine what inmates went through in prison. And, it is, anyone can't imagine, what they were doing, to be Pacific. They made it to where we couldn't order commissary. And, they barely feed you in prison. So we were starving. They wouldn't let us out for shower. We was placed on 24-hour lockdown, because of the pandemic, the quarantine. So they wouldn't let us out for showers. They wouldn't let us make any phone calls. We couldn't call our mother, wife, children, attorney, even attorneys we weren't able to call. And there were people dying. And, if you listen, there was a recent phone call that came out from R. Kelly. it was recently publicized on certain YouTube channels. However, the recordings took place during the incidents from my lawsuit, and he was crying on the call, and he was saying that animals are treated better than this.
Right.
And I'm glad that someone like him, you know, I mean, I wouldn't wish that experience on no one, but it's good that someone like him, who's always in the media, you know, to make a call like that, because it shines light on what they were doing to the entire inmate population, which I believe is about 1.2 million individuals, you know. But had it been the ordinary inmate who nobody knows, you know, such incidents probably would have stayed in the dark. But now that R. Kelly has a public a phone call that has been publicized, now I could use his phone call to draw attention to what they were doing, not just to me, but the other, you know, hundreds of thousands of inmates who experience, you know, the inhumane conditions of being incarcerated during a COVID pandemic, you know, because R. Kelly and I were actually incarcerated in the same federal holding facility at the time, and we were even on the same unit for a period of time. So with me filing this in my lawsuit and indicating, you know, the inhumane conditions, the inadequate medical care that, you know, was being received, now it's like, okay, now I could shine the light on not just what they did to me again, because in my particular incident, you know, I have experiences that were worse than what they were doing to just inmates in general. You know, I had an incident where I refused to quarantine with another inmate who was a 85-year-old medically compromised ill inmate. He was suffering from pre-existing medical conditions, and the coronavirus was basically killing him. They wanted me to quarantine with him. It didn't make any sense. You know, the health administrator had just advised us against quarantining with any inmate. So when I refused to go into the cell with him, I was placed in shackles and cuffs. They cut off my clothes, stripped me naked, and threw me inside of a cold prison cell with shackles and cuffs on, and left me in there just like that, with shackles and cuffs on, no clothes, for over 24 hours. You know, and they did it at a time where they knew, like, I was basically dying myself. You know, I had just suffered a near fatal asthma attack prior to that, where I was left unconscious. And if it wasn't for the other inmates banging on doors saying somebody help him, he died, they would have just left me like that without no medical care. And they did this days later, to where they put me in shackles and cuffs and stripped me naked and put me in a cold cell. They literally did this days after I had nearly died from COVID-19. So I mean, that's what the lawsuit was based upon. And, you know, I believe with R. Kelly stating that publicly, that you know, animals are treated better than that, it shows that my claims weren't just my claims. You know, someone else felt like that, and he thought he was gonna die in there. You know, and I
was gonna say, they don't care. They don't care about the inmates. We used to joke that the single largest contributor to, you know, deaths in Coleman, it was medical. I mean, medical. We get other guys going to medical and getting the wrong medication or not being given their medication. And there was a guy who got off the bus one time who was asthmatic, and you know, they get you off the bus like just before count, right? So you get out of like R&D, and then like you have to go to count, or, you know, like 4 o'clock, close to 4 o'clock. So he goes in immediately and says, "Hey, look, I need my inhaler." Like it's in medical, and they're like, yeah, right after count. He's like, no, man, I need it now. Like, I'm extremely asthmatic. And they were like, bro, they were like, then immediately they're like, they do the whole intimidation thing, get in the cell right now, or, you're going to be thrown in the shoe. So he's like, and they're like, look, we'll get it for you, but you don't run nothing here. So he goes and gets to the cell. Of course, they count you at 4, but it's not till like 4:20, 4:30 till they're completely done. But then he goes up to the CO. Hey, man, I need my stuff. The guy's like, we'll get to it when we get to it. Well, listen, it's after 5:30. Medical's gone. So by the time the cop comes out, he says, I called down there, but they're already gone. You have to wait till tomorrow. He's like, bro, what if something happens? You'll be fine. The dude died that night. He had an asthma attack. He'd been on the bus. He was extremely, a lot of anxiety, which isn't good. And he had an asthma attack in the middle of the fucking night, and he died.
Wow.
They don't give a shit. They don't give a fuck.
Did a lawsuit surface due to that?
I don't know, because what's so funny? You know what they always do? They always grab them and call medical, and then they come in with a stretcher, and they put you on a stretcher, and then they call the ambulance, and then they say he died on the way to the hospital. Wow. He never died there. They always died on the way to the hospital. We had a guy that went into medical one time. He went in on like a Thursday, complained about his chest pain. They said, we got to come back tomorrow. So he came back on Friday and said, I need to see the doctor. They said, you can see him on Monday. Right? He filled out the form. They said, no, you don't understand. I got chest pains. They said, yeah, Monday. You come back Monday. So that night, well, not that day, it was in the middle of the day. He came walking in, and his name was Kiki, and he fell, boom, right in front of my cell, dead. Had a massive heart attack in his 30s, like in his mid 30s. But he was extremely overweight, black guy, overweight, chest pains, died, and that was it. Like, they immediately they called medical. Medical came in. They put him on a stretcher. I'm telling you right now, the man was dead right in front of my cell. So they said later it came out he died on his way to the hospital. That man was dead before he hit the ground. He didn't move, not one bit. They came and they did the whole, boom, on his chest, and they lifted him up, and it took 4 people to get him outside. And listen, he was done, bro. He was done. He wasn't alive. So anyway, yeah, they'll kill you. They're not going to help you.
And see, my family thought that I was exaggerating when, I would call or email them and explain to them what was going on with not just me, but other inmates, and like you said, they will ignore your medical conditions, no matter how bad they are. Like, before I had the asthma attack, bro, like I was complaining. I really couldn't breathe. And I didn't know this was before I actually was diagnosed with COVID. By the time I had the asthma attack, I had been complaining for days about not being able to breathe, about how I need my inhaler. So after the incident where I passed out, I was literally probably unconscious for about 30 minutes, and they really just left me there. It took for inmates to really start like banging and yelling, saying, look, somebody do something. He probably did. Like, what is y'all doing? So they came and, provided me a little medical treatment, at least to get me back conscious. But that was it. But the next day, they gave me a COVID test. And it just so happened I test positive for COVID. So it wasn't just that my asthma was so bad, bothering me, but I had asthma and I had COVID, which is not a good combination. It's actually a very deadly combination. So when they realized this, of course, I kept filing complaints. I actually submitted that into my lawsuit. And then this was days later where they tried to force me to quarantine in a cell with another inmate who was technically dying. And because because I didn't, they use that as a reason to put me in shackles and cuffs, cut my clothes off, put me inside a shoe cell. You know, you probably been to the Fed, so you know about the shoe. People, for people who don't, is what they call the hole. You know, they put me in a hole, left me shackles and cuffs, no clothes on again, 24 hours. And it's like they wanted me to die. They probably thought that I was going to die because of that. And this is just one of the claims in my lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons. And for anyone who wants to look up that case number is 22 CV 0550. That one is in the Northern District of Illinois. That one is still pending. And again, I'm just so grateful to be on your platform, bro, because I would have never been able to reach the public this way, you know, especially not through any mainstream news sites, because, you know, they work with the government, and anything to expose this type of government corruption, especially on this level where it's costing people their lives, you know, they would never allow me to reveal this type of information in the mainstream media. So again, I appreciate you for having me and allowing me to tell my story on your platform.
Right. So at what stage is the lawsuit? I mean, you filed it. Have they responded yet?
Yeah, that's the thing. My last hearing was May 25th, and basically the judge is giving the defendants another month and a half, because the next hearing is July 13th. So they're giving them a little more time to respond. But in my last filings, you know, I found, I forgot which federal rule of civil procedure it is to be exact, but if they don't respond by the next hearing, then the court is forced to grant me the relief that I'm asking for. And of course, my life was jeopardized, so I'm probably gonna ask for maybe $10 million for that, you know.
Right. So is there anything that you feel like we haven't touched on?
Not much. It's just, you know, being in the feds, you know, and studying the law. I was one of the guys who other inmates, you know, came to for legal advice and help. And I just want to make it clear that the judicial system is so corrupt that we don't even have attorneys who will really defend our civil rights. You know, like even Ben Crump, he's supposed to, you know, be for the civil rights, and he's supposed to represent such cases. But what I realize about him is that, you know, he's basically like a clout chaser. You know, if your case is not in the mainstream media already, he doesn't really want anything to do with it. You know, so we are forced to study the law for ourselves in order to defend our civil rights. In this case, you know, that's one thing that I probably should cover. Like, this case is not just about civil rights. You know, this goes into the international jurisdiction, because, you know, with such inhumane living conditions, it violates our human rights, which makes it an international claim. And so I did file also in the International Court of Justice, which is the World Court, and it deals with the United Nations, because, you know, America has jurisdiction only over civil rights, you know, and constitutional rights. So once they start to violate our human rights, we have the human right to take our claims outside of that jurisdiction and bring it into the World Court. So now it comes down to this similar claims to what Ukraine filed against Russia, you know, because now our human rights are at stake. And again, we really don't have anyone over here that's really defending our civil rights. You know, we really have to like take a stand and study the law for ourselves, because we can't really rely on attorneys, because most attorneys, and I'm gonna say 98% of them, based on my own experience, are not willing to defend us when it comes down to the government. Yes, they may defend us against local police or whatever, but when it comes down to government agents and certain politicians, when they violate our rights, there's really no attorneys who are willing to take a stand and defend us. So we have to really defend ourselves. And if it wasn't for, again, platforms like such as yours, and if it wasn't for people like me who took time to actually study the law for ourselves, then these matters, you know, would have never been, would have never even surfaced. You know, the solutions, everyone would still be just oblivious to what we could do about this. So,
well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a buddy who is locked up. His name's Donovan Davis, black guy. He is a heavy equipment operator and mechanic. So he can fix diesel engines and heavy and hydraulic systems and all kinds of the massive machines that you pay hundreds of dollars an hour for to hire a mechanic. He also does, his family, and he grew up doing this. They do grading, where they grade, large swaths of land. They cut trees down, that whole thing, right? Mm. So he works at facilities in the camp at Coleman. Mm. Coleman is the largest federal complex in the nation, and it's an hour north of Tampa. So when it came down to COVID, do you remember the getting released in the CARES Act, where they're releasing inmates? You had 50% of your time completed, nonviolent. You have an out custody status, right? He's at a camp. You meet those requirements, and if you have a high probability of being susceptible to COVID, you have asthma, you have obesity, you have you use a CPAP machine, you have any of those things. So he has all of them. Here's the thing. There are and he's in there for a white-collar crime. White-collar crime, never been in trouble before. Made the mistake of going to trial, though. Got 17 years. But he had half of his sentence complete. Now, here's the thing. You have 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 guys with very similar charges as him, right? Like wire fraud, like white-collar guys. Guys that ran Ponzi schemes. Those guys all got released. And I have a list of the names of them. They all got released. So there's twofold to this problem. One, all of these people were released. Same criteria as Donovan. They were all white. Donovan is a black guy. And here's the other thing. Donovan clears all the lots around the prisons. There's 5 prisons in Coleman. He fixes all the equipment. He fixes the equipment so well, they're shipping equipment from other institutions to Florida to be repaired. They throw all their stuff on a truck. They ship it down here because guess what? Donovan gets paid $4 a day, $1.15 an hour, or whatever that comes to, $6, $7 a day, $8 a day, or you pay somebody $250 an hour to work on your hydraulic equipment and your diesel equipment and your forklifts, and he does it for almost nothing. Nothing. He does it for a cup of coffee a day at Starbucks. He'll save you. He just cleared all of the trees on the tree lines around the prisons. That's $100,000 job. Like literally, I got a copy of his wife sent me a copy of his his report from his counselors, he'd saved them over $1 million in the last like 4 years, they said. The warden loves him. Everybody thinks you're saving us tons of money. You're doing great. You're doing great. He gets to drive around in the truck around the perimeter by himself. He gets everything. But when it came time to releasing him, he didn't get released. Why would you release a guy that's saving you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year? Why would you release him? He meets the criteria. So during this whole thing, when this whole thing was going and when they were trying to get him released and they kept denying him, he got denied like I think 3 times. And every time they came up with some other reason. He's a risk to the public. Really? He's a white collar risk to the public? You have him in a camp. He's in a fucking camp, bro. There's no fence. I can leave anytime I want. I could say, hey, honey, pick me up on the street, jump in the car and drive off. So how he's got his custody level is 0. Like he's got like his, risk level is like 0. He's at a camp. More than 50% of his time, asthmatic, overweight, obese, uses a CPAP machine, all of the problems. He also has diabetes. They don't release him. Why would they? All these other guys got released. They were fine. Most of them didn't even have medical conditions. But they served 50% of their time. They were nonviolent. They got home. So during the course of this whole thing, his lawyer filed and said, because let's face it, if you know the law, him being turned down doesn't mean anything. The only way he really has a right to sue is because if you're discriminating against him because he's Jewish, race, religion. Well, he's saying, I'm suing because, I'm black. And they said, oh, that's not true. That's not what's happening. He said, really? I want a list of the race of everybody that was released. The BOP is refusing to give them that list.
Wow.
They're saying, we don't keep tabs on that. What are you talking about? You keep tabs. You know exactly who was released and what color they are. You can't look up an inmate without knowing what color he is. When I go to look up Inmate Finder, if I punch it, you punch in Matt Cox, it says, there's only 3 things they want to know. What's his name? What's his race? And what's his sex? That's it. So you know what race these guys are. I think their huge fear, and then what his lawyer thinks they're afraid of, is that when they do that list, it is going to be astronomically disproportionate to the true race that should have been released. It should be at least close to equal. I'll bet you 95% of the people that were released from prison were white. I have a buddy who writes for Forbes magazine who's been on this whole thing, and he also ordered a Freedom of Information Act. He said they won't give it to him either. And his whole thing is, his name's Walt Pavlo. He said that we were talking, and he said, Matt, I've helped like 40 people, 50 people get released. And I said, okay. He said, they weren't all white. I said, really? He said, no. 2 of them were Spanish. 2 Spanish guys, all white guys, no black guys. He said, I have another buddy who got released. His name is, we call him Zach. Zach helped something like 10 or 15 people. And he said, you know what? He said, out of all the people I helped, he said, I think only 2 of them were black guys that got out, that actually got it. Everybody else was white, he said. So anyway, Donovan's, filing a lawsuit. They're fighting, they're arguing, no. But think about it. So there's two things here. One, they weren't letting out a lot of black guys. And 2, why would you release this guy? He's saving you millions of dollars. You're not going to get another guy like this. Think about it. You're not going to get a guy with that type of skill set who can be in a camp and be allowed to drive around and do all these things by himself. That's a rare commodity, and it's worth millions. Why release him? Like, they will use you up, chew you up, and spit you out. You know that. They don't give a fuck. And this is the thing about the BOP, just about government in general. Like, if people think, oh, well, no, I want a big government. No, the government cares about you. Let me tell you something. When you give the government absolute power, they will treat you just like they treat those inmates, because they have absolute power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and there's no repercussions to how they can treat you. So they'll treat you however they want to treat you. And if you think they won't, you're fucking crazy. Like, if the government gets too big, which is already too big, this is how they treat you, like an inmate. You know, I mean, you've seen it. You're fighting right now. You're only fighting because you're bright enough to fight. Most people aren't.
Yeah. And
most people can't write emotion.
And I actually explained that too in my lawsuit. I mean, there were people like one of my cellmates. He really couldn't read. You know, it was sad because his case was so bogus, but he don't know nothing about the law, and he can't even really find out unless, you know, somebody like us who could point things out and tell him, because he couldn't read. And that's the case. That's the case for us. Like, I don't know what you know or think about R. Kelly, but he's another inmate. You know, now I know what the public has been programmed to think about him, but I was incarcerated with him and on the same unit for a while. This guy can't read. And I don't want to say he a total dummy, because I probably couldn't. I mean, he's a genius when it comes to producing good music, but I mean, he doesn't know which way to go. He don't know which way to turn. He can't read. And his case, like, he has the first case in history to where he was indicted on a one-man RICO. You know, the RICO was really
meant for organizations.
Yeah, for mobs, basically. You know what I mean? So that in itself is just ironic. And speaking on like the CARES Act, I was still incarcerated when William Barr mandated that. Now I was later sent to Gilmer, West Virginia. And I don't know if you're familiar with who Terry Flannery is, but he's known by Southwest T. His brother name is Demetrius Flannery. He's known as Big Meech.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. 50 Cent recently put out a series about their story. Okay, so now by the time I made it to Gilmer, West Virginia, Southwest T had just left. And he left because he was granted compassionate release, you know, based on the CARES Act. So, you know, I went to the law library, you know, I looked up his case, printed out some things, you know, basically to use, because I had been denied twice already for compassionate release. But it's like, okay, if he was granted this, and I know his case way bigger than mine, he was sentenced to 30 years for what they call CC, the criminal enterprise.
Yeah. CC, it was CCE, continuous criminal enterprise, basically like RICO.
Yeah, CCE. So there was violence and everything on his case. Now, again, my case, it was a drug case, but it was possession of 90 grams, which was never even found on me, but it's non-violent. And, you know, one of the criterias was that you can't be a violent offender. So, okay, I'm not a violent offender. I'm medically compromised. I have asthma. And I did a certain amount of my time. You know, like, why was I denied? You know what I'm saying? And how was his granted? Because, I mean, we fought under the exact same things, and he actually has violence in his case. You know what I mean? So, I mean, yes, they do discriminate against people racially, but I didn't understand that either, because I was seeing people get granted compassionate release who actually had cases like robbery, you know. So I really just don't understand the system. I really don't.
So, out of, I want to say, I don't know how many people it is, to be honest. I think it's like 10 or 15,000. Do you know there's only like less than half a dozen guys that got new charges that were released? Less than half a dozen, 6 guys that got new charges. All right, so think about that. If you could release 10 or 12,000 guys and put them on ankle monitors and have them go work, they don't cost you anything. You just save $50,000 a year to incarcerate these guys. Because most people say, it costs about $32,000 a year to incarcerate a federal prisoner. You're missing something. That federal prisoner now doesn't pay income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes. So when you add it all in, they actually cost close to $50,000 to incarcerate someone. So roughly $50,000. Instead, you can have him get out, put him on an ankle monitor, go to work. He only gets to go to work and come home, go to the grocery store and go to church and come home. Like, that's it. So you're telling me that you can release 10, 12,000 guys and monitor them. What the fuck do we have those guys in prison for then? If you can do that with those guys, why are they in prison? Why were they in prison to begin with? They're obviously, and now they're all contributing. Now they're all paying taxes. They're all paying sales tax, property taxes, income taxes, and it's not costing you $32,000 a year. So now what's happening? You're saving $50,000 a year by having them on an ankle monitor, and out of like 10,000 guys, 6 of them over the course of 2 years got new charges. I think 24 of them actually like got thrown back in jail. Like they did something like, ran off with their girlfriend and for the weekend, didn't, whatever, they do stupid stuff. They violated. I'm talking about new charge. A violation is just stupid. That's not a new charge. That's not a criminal charge. It doesn't hurt anybody but the inmate. I'm talking about new charges. Like 6 guys got new charges, and they were minor charges. These aren't like they murdered somebody. These are guys that like they sold drugs out of their house or something. Like, okay, so what? And they got another charge, and they got violated, and they went back to prison. They got an extra 2 years, and that's it. So what are you doing? You see what I'm saying? Like that's hundreds of millions. Like you add that up, 50,000 times like the 12 or however many thousand guys that got released times 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're saving hundreds of thousands, or sorry, millions of dollars every single year. Why are they in prison? Now, not even to mention the astronomical length of guys' sentences. Like the same sentence that you would get in almost any country in Europe. You get 6 months, 2 years. Here you get 10, 15 years. And this, like the only reason that makes sense is money. That's it. Money and politics. So I mean, I hear you. Like I definitely believe the system is extremely, unjust. But listen, what can you think of anything else that we didn't touch on, or
we're speaking on the money issues, just in closing, like what I discovered about the system, like you just mentioned the disparity of how much time we get in America versus most other countries. Now, what I didn't realize is that once we are sentenced, a bid bond is established, which goes on the stock market basically, and people can invest into that. And a lot of people, a lot of rich, powerful people invest into the prison system that way. And they make money off interest as long as you sit in prison. So if we could, sentence these guys with bid bonds with a 10-year duration versus a 2-year duration, then that makes more money for the investors. And I mean, it's crazy. It'll confuse a lot of people, who don't understand, but it's definitely based on money. And with me being a rap artist, I also want to explain how, most of the people who, have their money invested in the music industry, particular hip hop music, they own the major record labels who own the labels that people think are major labels, and they are more significantly invested in the prison industry than anything. And it goes hand in hand. Like if we could if we can saturate the market through these artists with music that's basically influencing their culture to kill each other and sell drugs, then that increases the chances that a lot of people, more people, will start going to jail and killing, because we glorifying murder now. We glorifying selling drugs. We glorifying robbery. This is getting into their heads. It's influencing them to want to kill everybody they get into it with, influencing them to want to sell drugs so they can have the biggest chains on to and impress these girls. And so now we have them, on the market. They involved in the drug trade. They killing. And so it's a revolving cycle now. We influencing them to commit crimes, and once they commit crimes, we make money off when they commit crime, and we also making money off of the music that's influencing everybody to commit crime. So I just wanted to close on that note. And again, thanks a lot for having me. I mean, you're a blessing to a lot more people than you probably are aware of, because the way that the government is set up, we call it the trap in our culture, because it's like we trapped into committing crimes. Like, I don't want to justify anything that anyone does, including myself, but when you grow up in poverty and you look up to rappers who influence you to sell drugs and kill because this is all your parents are probably not even suitable to raise you properly, because they probably either sell drugs themselves or they probably drug abusers, dope fiends, crackheads themselves. So how are they going to guide you out of that lifestyle and keep you from falling into that trap?
Right.
So, you have good people. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't think anyone was ever considered perfect other than Jesus, but you have good people who just make such mistakes, and then they make such people look like the worst people on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, I looked even to you a little bit. I see that, if I'm not mistaken, you were incarcerated yourself for like $55 million of fraud or something like that.
Right.
And it's crazy because whether you did that or not, the people behind the scenes who control the government commit crimes far worse than anything that you ever did, that you was ever convicted of, and things far more than I was ever convicted for. But again, people like you and I are technically like blacklisted. They don't want us to get this type of message out to the masses. So again, I salute you for having this platform, and thank you for having me and allowing me to tell my story.
Sure, no problem. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, I used to say the BOP wants me to work at Walmart when I get out. Right? Like that's all they want from you. Work at Walmart, go get a job at Walmart or McDonald's. That's all they want. They don't want to see you get out and do something. And I don't want that.
And I told my judge that I just had a hearing to get off papers early, and she said, you need to work a 9 to 5. She's not satisfied with my proof of income. And this is the only reason why she denied me. I don't have any violations, but they denied me because proof of income. Well, your book royalties doesn't show that you were occupied. your music stream doesn't show that you were occupied, the events. And I'm explaining to her, look, you want me to work 8 hours a day, but sometimes I work 12 hours a day writing books or writing songs or being in the studio. But you want me to work for Walmart or McDonald's,
Yeah.
and not because I'm working for myself. You're not satisfied with it.
No. They even if you're making more money doing it, no, they don't want that. I don't think they want you. I just don't see them wanting people to be successful when they get out. They say they do because it sounds good, but they don't do anything to help encourage that. What they help encourage is for you to go get a job at Walmart or Amazon or go work at FedEx or go work at, that's what they want you to do. Work 60, 70 hours a week, and be, work from 9 until 6 or 7, go home, go to sleep, watch Netflix, go to bed, wake up the next morning, do it again. That's what we want. Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I appreciate you guys checking out the video. And if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this. Also, please share the video and leave me a comment in the comment section. It really does help. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you.